Hey there, gentlemen. Today we're going to be making some potions, whether it be health potions or stamina potions or mana potions. Are you getting the impression that I haven't made these yet and that these renders are coming after the tutorial? Well, that is indeed true because I'm going to be freestyling this one and hopefully we will get some good looking potions. But before we get to the potion making part of this tutorial, a huge thank you to, I think, the first sponsor on this channel. Pretty sure that lines up. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this tutorial. Your internet traffic, whether it be just what it is you look up or what it is you pay for, so in fact, credit card numbers and stuff like that, can actually be exposed to hackers, malicious people that want your information, and this is the exact kind of traffic that you want to be encrypting, which is exactly what NordVPN offers. You can use NordVPN on your computer, you can use it on your phone, you could use it in whatever country you're going to. This is a kind of security measure that you are bringing along with you, and there are additional benefits beyond just masking your internet traffic that may be of interest to you. The main one is going to be avoiding or circumventing region blocking, which is this idea of, let's say, Netflix or HBO Go or whatever it may be has a show that is only available in a certain country or vice versa. Avoiding region blocking will let you watch shows that will make it look like you're in that country and you can access all sorts of things, and this is also useful for accessing websites that may be banned in certain countries. Long story short, it makes all your internet usage, what it is you can access, what it is that you are actually showing and revealing to people, it makes all that something that you have a lot more control over, and this is the purpose of using NordVPN. And while the annual subscription is already super affordable, I'm going to make a deal that is going to make that much sweeter. This is a Black Friday deal where every purchase of a 2-year plan will get you 4 additional months for free. To access this deal, what you're going to do is go to my link in the description, which is going to be nordvpn.com/defaultcube, and you can use promo code defaultcube to get access to this Black Friday deal. So hopefully that is something you are into. But now back to making some magical potions in Blender. Let's do it. I guess we may as well start. So I haven't done modeling in a while, which is kind of a cool thing because, I don't know, every single tutorial of mine recently has been like materials and nodes and stuff, so it's good to get into the easy stuff. I'm not throwing shade, Josh. I'm just saying modeling's easy. Either way, start with the cylinder. We're going to have a lot of rotational segments, so it has a lot of rotational resolution in some sense. We're starting off by making the glass bottle, is the essence of this. And to reshape this, I like to go into edit mode, scale, shift Z. So easy, so easy. None of the complexities of nodes, just so easy. I'm going to make it about the thickness that I want the drinking funnel, the thing at the top to be, and then we're going to widen the rest. To do that, we're going to Control R to loop cut, bring that up, and then I'm going to go for kind of like a Erlenmeyer flask kind of look. I don't know if you guys ever took a chemistry class, but this is the thing you use to boil. No, use a boiling flask for that. I remember that from Breaking Bad. Control B to bevel, scroll up. This is just so it has a nice rounded base. I think an Erlenmeyer flask is made for mixing because of the flat bottom. I know you're definitely not supposed to put it on a Bunsen burner. Whatever. I don't know if you guys even took chemistry. We're going to bevel the bottom. We also want to smooth the transition, or maybe only very slightly smooth the transition between like neck to base. So I'm just going to make a couple divisions here, not too big. Boop. And yeah, I mean, already this is kind of like the essence of the bottle. Super simple. Couple things that we are going to do. First of all, delete the top of this. So this is kind of like a infinitely thin kind of like surface or shell of a bottle. By the way, I should save. Call it something unique, like this is going to be available on Patreon, just so you guys know. This is going to be an infinitely thin thing, and we're going to give it thickness using the solidify modifier, but for now, just treat this like, something that has no thickness. I guess we also want to give this thing a lip. I mean, listen, this is my first time making it, at least live. So I'm a bit, strapped for ideas here, but I'm just going to scale this to make the lip, and just like last time, we bevel. Whoops, Control B, not Control V. Who knows what that could mean? So something like this. And you know what? We can actually bevel 2 things at the same time and have them interact. So those are called bevel collisions, by the way. You Control B, they pass through each other, you hit C, and now they've collided, which is a cool thing about bevels. You could do that, but I don't think I actually want them to collide. Something like that should be good. Yeah, I think that's generally a good looking shape. Now that we're done, right click, shade smooth, looking good. Again, to give this thing thickness, because if we gave this like a glass BSDF, or in general, we tried to make it like, glassy and reflective and all that, it would look weird because, physically accurate glass is not infinitely thin. Okay, so here, actually, we should give this thing a name. We'll call this Erlenmeyer. Oh, that's not how you spell it, dude. Erlenmeyer? Well, that's definitely my best attempt. Erlenmeyer flask. We're going to add a solidify modifier, which is a modifier that takes your geometry and kind of applies a extrude along normal, at least when you set it to simple. I don't know what complex does. Probably something stupid hard. With a distance, extruding with a distance of the thickness. Now, you could decide whether you want to extrude inwards or outwards. And by the way, if it's kind of hard to see what's going on here, go to this triangle. It has a name. It's called Object Data Properties. Go to Normals, enable this. This is just going to make it so the auto smoothing only happens if the angle between two normals is within a certain threshold. So we can make that threshold large or small, whatever. What was the point? The point was the solidify modifier. You could either have it go inwards or outwards. I'm going to recommend outwards because we're actually going to have another use for this bottle that relies on the inside of the geometry being unaltered, so not like the solidify going in here. And that's just going to be for making the liquid. So you just give it a thickness. I wonder what even thickness does. I don't mess with a lot of these settings because, again, modeling is easy, and I don't touch it that often. Okay, cool. Let's turn this into glass just so we can feel like we're making progress, even though, in the grand scheme of things, we're all just headed towards death, but that's fine. I'm just going to set up the render scene, set it to cycles, GPU. This is just up to you. I mean, actually, no, this is not up to you. You definitely want to be using cycles whenever you're dealing with glass and reflection and stuff like that. So first thing I wanted to set up, and this is why I have all these render settings open, is in the world properties. I'm going to set up an HDRI. My hands are moving faster than my brain. Wouldn't be the first time. I'm just going to pick a random HDRI I found from HDRI Haven. We might switch this out later. To make it invisible, we're going to make it transparent, and very soon it's going to be important to enable transparent glass because we don't want it showing in the background of the glass. But first of all, let's make it glassy. You don't need to mess with any of this. Super simple, just add in glass BSDF. It's slightly more like expensive maybe than some other options, but it does look like glass, and it would look more like glass if we enabled this setting. So now we can actually see through it and put whatever we want in the background. Notice that the reflections are still like dependent on our HDRI, right? Like you can still see the window of whatever room we were in, but we can actually see through it. There's transparency. And this would be a good time to play around with the thickness. So when this is set to 0, this is what we had, right? Which is why I recommended we add a tiny bit of thickness. And I guess the thicker it is, the more it refracts. And I imagine these things are actually fairly thick because they're meant to hold like certain chemicals like hydrochloric acid and things that would just burn your hand and you don't want to mess with. So that's pretty cool. Oh, by the way, another thing, I think this one's not accurate to the chemistry, but if you were to like to inset this and like add some like loop cuts and stuff like that, just for a idea, you don't have to do this, but just as an idea, you can select the bottom face. Let me do this in solid view. Proportional editing, so we kind of have a radius of effect, and you can make kind of like a curved bottom that, again, the solidify modifier like curves with, and this just adds like an interesting shape to our glass. Again, I want to say this isn't like physically, or at least not physically, in terms of practical use, not accurate, but come on, we're doing like a health potion. So I'm just gonna add a bit of a lip. Nobody complained about a bit of a lip. Just looks cool. Okay, so let's see. We have our glass BSDF. IOR is index of refraction. It means what coefficient. It's a number. Let's start with that. It's a number that describes how light reacts as it passes through the medium as compared to air. So air, or perfect air, like a vacuum, has an IOR of 1. Glass has, I think, 1.5. So slightly higher than 1.45. If you get ridiculous with this number, you can see we're getting interesting effects. And I wonder, does this let you go negative? It does. Whatever, different video. 1.5, you can also play with the roughness, like how frosty is this. I recommend either keeping it at 0 or at something low like 0.1, just so it's a bit foggy. And if you want to add like a lot of, I don't know, I guess realism, we could have this roughness, again, which areas are frosty or not. It could be dependent on some kind of like noise smudge map, which is kind of a cool idea. So what we could do is we could do a color ramp, just make it a bit more contrasty, nothing crazy, bit of detail, bit of roughness. And remember, where it's black, we're going to have a roughness of 0, perfectly shiny, and otherwise white, which is, what is that? That's going to be a roughness of 1. So we want this one to be a lot lower if it does achieve here, so something like 0.2, so that we still have the gradient, but it's not super rough in like the dusty areas. So let's see what that looks like. So now we have some areas that are rough and some that are not, and this would be a good time to enable your denoiser, boys. I'm not going to do it because I know some people have like GPUs that ain't too hot, and I don't want to make people jealous. So we could even up the contrast and make those areas, so just to see, so you can see what this looks like. So some areas are super frosty. Maybe 0.3, we'll get a little crazy. There you go. It's those little details that will make it look more realistic in the end. That's the glass material. Let's make the fluid, whether it be HP, stamina, mana, urine, whatever. Let's make it. To do that, you're thinking, oh, we need to do a fluid simulation, and you could, and then you can actually move the bottle and stuff like that, and it will be splashes. But I'm going to do a stupider method. We're just going to duplicate the bottle. This one's going to be fluid. So this is if you wanted to actually model the fluid, not simulate it. And before we do that, let's call this material glass, and let's give our fluid a new material. So we're going to decouple it, and we're going to call this fluid. For the fluid material, I guess we could just do either a glass BSDF again, but this time mess with the settings for like water settings, or just use principled BSDF. I don't know which one's better for this, but whatever. Let's see. Let's disable Erlenmeyer so we can actually see this. This is our fluid. It's going to be inside of here. Of course, we don't want the whole thing to be full. So just a trick to make a realistic fluid is you could just like either like cut here and we can have like the fluid go up to here, or you could even like do a boolean. It's kind of dependent on the orientation of your bottle, but for now, let's just keep it simple. So I'm going to add a loop cut there. I'm going to go to wireframe. I'm going to take everything below that, or above that, I guess, and delete it. So now we kind of have this base right here. And this is one thing that I guess we do not want solidify modifier for. So again, the reason we kept this flask around and I said, oh, we need to solidify outwards, not inwards, is because we're going to use this mesh again to make the fluid. So we need the interior to be the same. So I clicked F to fill, which in solid view looks like that. So I just filled in the top. Let's see what this looks like. So this is our fluid. We enable the flask, and now it looks like one's inside another. Of course, it might look a bit strange at certain angles because cycle, I don't know, dude. Point is, to fix these glitches, kind of general idea, set origin to volume. So this time we can like scale from the center. And just scale it by something very tiny, or something very close to 1, so it's barely altered, like 0.99. And just that little thing is going to make it render much, much better. So it's kind of like inside the bottle, but just barely, right? There's just a tiny film of air. And in fact, we could do 0.99 again, or we could just undo and this time scale by like 0.97 or something, just so that there's definitely no intersection. So again, one's kind of nestled inside another. And the thing about this is at any point we could kind of like add a loop cut here and like bring it down, etc., or just slide down the face. For the material, I guess if you want to use a principled BSDF, we pick a color, let it be red, dependent on your potion. Let it be transmissive, so it's kind of like fluidy. It's looking a bit like cough syrup, but kind of like very mystical, very cool cough syrup. And what else could we do? We could also change around the index of refraction. Assuming that this is water-based, the index of refraction of water is like 1.3, I believe. So this will make it act more like water. Again, the number you pick here is very important. So 0, you get like, black abyss, and then you can get metallic-y looking things if you go high. 1.3, that's a good number. If you want to be a bit controversial, so this isn't technically accurate, but it is very mystical. I'm going to set up the color for the RGB, right? So I've made an RGB node connected to the base color. Now here's the controversial part. We could choose this to also be the emission color so that the fluid actually glows as if it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's an actual healing potion and it glows, and we can make that emission less strong. Now that's kind of a controversial take. You might not want to do this because it's very not realistic. So this is before, this is after. Maybe do this with caution or make it very, very not that strong. I'm going to go without it, but just so you know, that option exists. Maybe I'll do it in the final renders, who knows. Other than that, you can make it more reflective, but of course it's going to make it look weird, so that it kind of depends on you. I guess physically accurate, unless there's a lot of stuff hanging in the atmosphere of the water, you make it roughness 0 or something close to it, but I don't want to go down there, okay? So there we go. We have glass, we have fluid, we know how to make any kind of fluid. Again, we just take this mesh and either boolean or cut and do a fill at the top, right? But I guess one thing that's missing, two things that's missing, I guess, is we could do the cork and we could also do bubbles. Not sure if we're going to do bubbles because, I don't know, who has the time for that? But one thing we're absolutely going to do is we are going to do the cork, okay? So how do you make a cork? Super simple. You model again. It feels so good to model. This one could have less geometry because it's smaller. Boom. We're going to scale this. Shift Z. Whoops, I keep doing that. I guess that's the first time I did it, but I have a feeling it's going to keep happening. Scale. Actually, make sure proportional editing is off. Scale. Shift Z until it's the thickness. It just happened again. Until it's the thickness of the flask, and it's probably better to see this in wireframe mode. Okay, cool. We're going to bring this up. We're going to edit mode, scale on the Z-axis. And I haven't seen a cork in a long time, but I think it's kind of like this. Most of it's hanging out just like that. And then what you want to do is you want to select the interior face. This one's scaled down a bit, so it's not like a perfect cylinder. It kind of tapers, which is the point of a cork. That's why they work, and this one gets bigger. And then what you do is you take both of these, and we are going to bevel, just like last time. Control B, and this just gives it that nice shape to it. There you go. So that's going to be our cork. Let's see what that looks like. That looks pretty good. Just like last time, first of all, shade smooth, but just like last time, we could like scale it by like 0.99, just so it's kind of a bit more in there, in case it wasn't already. But that's a good looking cork. Let's give it a quick material. Easy. Make a material. Call it cork. I guess a cork is just kind of like a very holy, not in, spiritual sense, but a very holy, porous kind of material. So we need a lot of circles. Voronoi texture is the way to get that. If you look at the distance function, basically calculates a lot of points and measures the distance from them. And that gives circles, really. But if we take this, we color ramp it. And first of all, it's, increase this number so there's more of those. When we color ramp it, we can kind of make the contrast higher, which kind of defines our circles more nicely. We could also choose colors here. So, corks are kind of like orangey yellow, maybe a bit darker. Take that, copy it over to the black. So anytime it goes to the circle-y part, it can just be like a darker shade of the same thing, maybe a bit redder, less saturated, darker, something like that. Hook it up to the base color, hook it up here. It's a good start. Kind of looks like a leopard print. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a cougar would wear this on something, but it's weird. It's weird to the point. To make it look good, first of all, roughness, bump it up. It should be near 1 because this thing's incredibly rough. And second of all, before we fix the color, bump node, this is kind of like the silver bullet. We're going to use the same kind of thing, regardless of the fact that this has color. We're going to use this as a height map to generate normals, and boom, it's looking like there's actual like shading and like depth and stuff going on here. First of all, let's fix the color. I'm thinking dip the saturation and also mess with the hue a bit. It's just kind of like the wrong shade of whatever it's supposed to be. I feel like that's closer, and we can make it have more porous-y kind of situation here. I think that looks pretty good. You could play with it a bit more, but I think that's about as good as we're gonna get it. We could make the strength of the normal a little less intense, and okay, cool. So I think generally the form of this is fine. We got good materials, we got good shapes. Just so you know, if you're curious, you can make a bunch of bubbles here. I don't know if we're gonna get too much into it, but what you do is you take your fluid, which is kind of weird that we can kind of isolate it. But you take your fluid and then you set up a particle system in it. We'll see. We'll try messing around with it. We add a particle system. Might be easier to see in solid mode. Although the thing is, we were gonna have it like spawn from the volume. Have it emit on the first and last frame, so it's not like adding more particles throughout time, but all the frames that will ever exist there, and they're gonna exist for like 200 frames or 250, however long. So in other words, all the particles are already there, and we can choose how many that's gonna be. What we want to do with these is in the source, we want to say emit them in the volume, so like at different spots inside of here. And then I guess the last thing is for each of these particles, we want to map it to a bubble. To do that, we are going to make a kind of like reference bubble. And I think what's going to happen here is it's going to work, but it's not going to be very visible, but at least it's worth trying. So this is going to be our bubble. So let's just call it that. What we're going to do with this is for this in the render, I think it's render, we're going to render as, in other words, for every particle, we're going to have it map to an object, which object? Our bubble. Boop. So now you can kind of see Again, this thing's, I guess this would be an argument to make it like less rough so you can kind of see through it a bit more. You can see there's a bunch of spheres packed in here. One thing we could do is make them like less, like 25, so there's only like a few of them. And in other words, basically if we did something to these spheres to make it look like more like a bubble material, it will translate to all of these. Okay, cool. How do we do this? We're going to make a material for the bubble. Now, I guess if we were going with the physically accurate theme, maybe a quick trick would be transmission. This will make it kind of like glassy. And I guess the second thing you want to do is make it kind of have the IOR. Now, bubbles are kind of weird where they have this kind of like thin film effect. So really, they're supposed to be these kind of like solidified things. Maybe we'll skip out on that part. But it has like an IOR of 1 on the inside and then something slightly higher on the outside, like where there's actual soap. But like 1.1, something close to 1, generally gives you bubbles. So again, if you wanted to do this physically accurately, and let's actually take down the roughness as well, and shade smooth. If you wanted to do this physically accurately, you'd add in a solidify modifier just so it has like a tiny bit of thin film, and you want to be able to like see through it and stuff like that. I guess that's what I guess there's no reason not to add a solidify modifier. That should carry out to every particle, assuming that it actually uses the particle stack. Modifier stack is what I mean. I don't know if this is what it's referring to, but just in case. Generally, this is a good way to get bubbles, and a problem you might experience, I don't think we're experiencing it here, but one of your bubbles might be sticking out, and in that case, you could zoom out. You could either kind of do some tricks with, does this scale affect that scale? It does. You can choose the size of the bubble. That's one way to fix it. Or you could just kind of keep changing the seed here to get different bubble positions. So you can see some of them are sticking out. I'm just going to keep generating until they don't. I guess this one's sticking out. And I guess another thing is we do have the glass to kind of camouflage this. But yeah, I don't have a simple solution minus using like volume shaders and stuff like that. So now you can see our fluid has some bubbles suspended in it. I'm just going to bump up the roughness again. And for the bubble material, even though this is closer to physically accurate, we'll just make it close to 1.3 so it's less noticeable. We're also going to make it rougher. I don't know. Or I guess one other thing you could do to make it look more realistic is the alpha. And this is just kind of like the transparency of the thing. So you can see it's actually like going away over here. We can make it like 50% transparent. And I'm thinking, now that I'm seeing this whole thing like as one entity, I want more bubbles. Let's bump that up. Hopefully none of them stick out. Cool. We could hide this, and that should keep our bubbles here, at least on render. If I was to change anything about this, I think I would make the cork. Again, I haven't seen like a cork in a long time. I'd make it a bit smaller, like that. And yeah. Now, one thing to consider, just so you know, you might want to, since all these parts are kind of like separate, but they're supposed to be together, but maybe you want the cork to be separate so you can remove it. You might want to parent these all together, or even more simply, you just, shift-click a bunch of these and use the join command. Point is, if you were to rotate this whole system around, let's say, the 3D cursor, if you were to rotate this whole system, again, the fluid doesn't really react to it, so it should be like level over here. You could either, again, update it by saying, I know the mesh is going to be this way, so I'm just going to do a boolean on this. So instead of like doing the loop cut, you make the fluid oriented this way. Or again, you could do a fluid simulation, or even more crazy, you could do all of this in nodes and have it react to the orientation, but that's some crazy stuff. So let's not talk about that for now. Kind of like final thing is you just kind of want to set up your scene. So you just want to kind of flicker through HDRIs. I mean, I think the one we had to begin with was pretty good looking. But really, this is just going to change the look of the glass, since that's kind of like the main thing going on here. I'm just going to go back to the original, whichever one that was. I think it was the power plant. There you go. It kind of has this kind of very dark, sinister HP potion look to it. By the way, last thing, it's obvious, but I didn't mention it. The color, whether you have it just driving base color or also emission, you could have it be, just by changing the color, stamina. You could have it be mana, stuff like that. So super easy, super easy. And you could also change the shape of the bottle into flask. It already is a flask, like a boiling flask, or like a tube, like a testing tube for a tiny little potion. But yeah, I think that's how you make potions. I think that was a pretty coherent tutorial, pretty photorealistic. You could either set this down on a plane. I mean, I guess if you want this to be photorealistic, You need to set the scale so that it's not like 2 meters tall and all that, but whatever. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, do consider the Patreon. Why would you consider the Patreon? Why would you just watch a free tutorial and then go to Patreon? It makes no sense. Well, Patreon has exclusive tutorials. First of all, these are tutorials that I do not put on the default Cube or CG Matter channel, so maybe you'll find something there. There's quite a bit of a backlog now since I've been doing it for months. But we have exclusive tutorials. We have blend files, so you better bet your bippy, as my 6th grade teacher would say, better bet your bippy that this blend file and maybe hundreds, maybe 800, there's a lot of blend files on there that you can pick up for various projects. Behind the scenes access, Discord access, well, what else is there? There's sometimes there's early releases. There's a name for that. Early content. Forget what that's called, dude. Either way, that happens sometimes if it's not like an advertised video. I can upload it early and stuff like that. Early access. Maybe I already said that. All this stuff exists on the Patreon, and it is a great way to keep CG Matter and Default Cube running, but only get Patreon if you want those benefits that I talked about. I want to thank all 550 to 560, maybe 570 now. I don't know. I want to thank all the patrons that have joined and stick around. I thank you. I credit you at the end of the tutorials because it's kind of like a big deal. So thank you. Now you know how to make potions. Let's get rid of this. It's ruining the vibe. Now you know how to make some potions. And with that, I'll bid you adieu. See ya.